Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining the Women's Mortgage Network podcast. Today we have Cindy Ertman on. I am so excited to get to speak to her a little bit more. She was one of our keynote speakers at our event this last fall, and now I get to dive in and ask her a few more personal questions. Welcome, Cindy.
Thank you. It's so great to be here with you, Nicole. I'm excited about this.
Thanks, me too. So, right now, you are the founder and CEO of Defining the Difference. But prior to that, you have a pretty impressive and highly successful career in the mortgage industry. Let's go back to the roots of how you got in the mortgage industry, what that looked like, and sort of how you transitioned into what you're doing now.
Absolutely. Well, at the beginning, because we all have crazy stories, right? We all end up here by accident. But I was working in the real estate development industry. Actually, I'd been just moved to Los Angeles by my company. And we were an apartment development company, the largest in the state of California. And I loved my job. In fact, it's the career that got me ready to be a mortgage originator. It just tapped me on every level, and I had so much growth opportunity. And I had just found out I was pregnant with my first child. I had just signed an offer for my first house, and I walked into my boss. And these are the days where you walked your verification, VOE into your boss and they signed it real time. So I walked into my boss's office on a Friday and I said, "Hey, Corey, I need you to sign my VOE." I said, John and I are buying a house. And he said, "Well, you might want to have a seat." And he said, because we were the partners of Gibraltar Savings and Loan. And that's when the S&L industry got absolutely slapped upside the head by the federal government. And he informed me that our company was being shut down on Monday and I wasn't going to have a job 2 days later. And I literally, my heart sank that day. And I'm like, because what do you do? Like, I just got into escrow on a house and I had not told him that I was pregnant with my first child. So I told him that. And I said, "You have to help me. I'm not going to be able to get a job. I just moved to LA. I don't know anybody." And so we quickly negotiated a fast severance for a few months of pay. He signed my verification of employment. I packed up my desk and, went home, had the baby. And then I was like, what am I going to do now? And I felt very lost. And a friend of mine said, "Hey, I think mortgage is the best kept secret for women. You love the financial side. I think you should check it out." And so it's so funny to look back and go, I checked it out, went to work for California Federal Savings and Loan in Brentwood, California. And I mean, an HP 12C, not any clue as to what to do, a script for my first call. You got to figure it out. And I lived with one thing, because having a new house and a new baby, and I had been more the primary income earner, is every day I just kept telling myself, failure's not an option here. I can't fail at this. I have to figure it out. So I became a very determined new mortgage loan originator to start.
That is impressive. Holy cow. That's a story. So, how long then were you in the mortgage industry after that before you transitioned over into the coaching business that you have now?
Well, I mean, in terms of a full-time mortgage coach, 28 years. Being an originator, I really set myself right out of the gate. And partially because I had some mentors and coaches early on. And I just set my sights on, I want to become one of the best mortgage loan originators in the country. And I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine and a mentor, and he said to me, "No one can make you great. You have to want to be great." And when someone just says something to you right at the right time where we can actually hear it, and those words meant something to me. And I remember getting in my car and driving home from that meeting, and I'm like, he's right. Like, no one can make Cindy Ertman great. I have to decide I want to be great. And what does that look like? So I made a decision that every single day I was going to try to learn more, be better, become the best version of myself, create more value for my partners. And every day I woke up and I said, I want to be great. I want to be the best. And how am I going to have to grow into that person? So, many years later, I was starting to do some training nationally and speaking nationally. And just because my numbers, I was in the top 100 originators in the US for over 15 years. And honestly, Nicole, there wasn't that many women in that pack at the time. And we didn't really have female mentors, for all my mentors were men. And I was really proud of that. And then I got asked to be on the faculty of Loan Toolbox, which was run by Tim Brahim. And I was on that faculty for 17 years. And that was just to give back to the industry. on the side, and by that time, my business partner and I were running our own mortgage bank. My partner and his financial partner had started a small mortgage bank here in Southern California, and they asked me to be a partner. And I joined them, and we had our own mortgage bank for 15 years until 2007 hit and the whole world imploded. And we got our first buyback, I think, in February of that year. And my partner and I looked at each other and went, I mean, the writing was on the wall. So we wound down our own small mortgage bank and then plugged into a small national mortgage bank where Brett and I went on to build Southern California from them from 1 to 20 branches. But we'd already built our branch to about 1.2 billion and
Wow.
32 loan officers that I co-led with my partner. And so, I had built my business to, 150 to 230 million was my highlight year, running a large branch, managing a big team, both sales and ops, and then being on the faculty of this national mortgage training company for 17 years. And so, I had, by this time, I was on the executive leadership team of a small mortgage bank. So other than secondary, I've kind of worn all the hats, and I'm just so passionate about this business. But I was starting, the majority of my time at that point was being spent. I was like recruiting people, and I was training new branch managers and training branches and leadership. And I loved helping people grow. And I had taught myself how to become one of the top originators in the nation. And I loved helping other people achieve that level of success. So it took several years of me carrying that little idea around in my head. And then I had received the award from Mortgage Executive Magazine as one of the 100 most influential mortgage executives in America. And I talked about this at our WMN event because my first reaction when I got that award is that it ended up on my desk by accident, like they sent it to the wrong person. Because like I didn't feel worthy of that kind of an award. And it took a minute, like to even, it's one thing to get a top producer, you did 100 million or you did 50 million or whatever, right? But it was quite different to get an award as one of the 100 most influential. And I really sat with that. And I thought if I was being honored in that way, maybe it really was time to use my gifts in a different way and help other people be really successful too. And I coach both men and women. I have a lot of male clients that I love, but I have a strong affinity for a lot of women originators and building women leaders in our industry because it's been such a great industry for me. So I want to be able to help other women rise.
I love that. Well, congratulations. That is a huge accomplishment. And, it sounds like you built this extraordinary career, but I know you also have a pretty big family too. So what do you think is like the biggest misconception that women have about what it takes to do it all?
Well, I'm living proof that you can. So for starters, you can, but I do think a little bit differently. And one thing I realized early on is you can't do it your own, all on your own. And as strong women, I'm sure you can even relate to this, right? Like we think we can do it all. And look, I can do a lot. There's no question, but that doesn't mean we should do everything ourselves just because we can. And I teach we cannot scale a business and do everything ourselves. That's for sure. But I realized that I really had to, over time, start looking at what type of support did I really need to be able to have this big career. And I was committed to it. But I had three, little kids and a husband, and I was very committed to being a great mom. And I was raised in a good family and had good, strong family values and raised in a Christian home. And I really wanted a very strong family unit and I wanted a great business. So I started looking at what it was going to take to achieve that. And so I would really encourage, first and foremost, that people really look at what they need to be successful. Because, first of all, for me, it started with taking on a loan officer assistant and hiring an LOA. We called them loan coordinators at the time. And that really changed the game for me. And I hired that person when I couldn't afford it. I was scared to death taking on the expense. And I hear that a lot from originators saying, I'm afraid, or they need a second one and they're afraid to commit the dollars. But my experience is within 90 days, they usually pay for themselves. And it's worth the risk because I believe the best investment we ever make is the investment we make in ourselves and that we kind of rise to the occasion. So I feel very strongly that one of the biggest challenges is is not allowing yourself to get the help that you need. I think women too, Nicole, feel guilty for hiring help. Like they should be able to do it all, and they should be able to clean the house and make dinner and go to all the sporting events, and you just can't. So I started looking at, I mean, I had a nanny, full-time nanny, because I had 3 children and I had a full-time career and I needed that help. And then I realized, I started thinking about, like when my kids got into school, well, how else could she help me? And I just thought differently. I took her to the store 3 times with me. I trained her how to buy my groceries. I made lists. I showed her what kind of, organic meats and vegetables I eat. And then over time, she spoke no English when I hired her, and I spoke no Spanish. And we worked off a translating machine for a while. And over the time, I learned a little Spanish. She learned a little English. She learned a lot more English than I learned Spanish, so let me be clear. But I taught her how to make meals for our family, simple meals, like how to bake chicken and how to make rice. And so I could come home at the end of the day. I usually would leave the office at 6. My office was close by, which is great. I was home by 6:15. And the table would be set and the chicken would be cooked and the silverware and the water was on the table, and I could turn on the broccoli. And that seems silly, but one of my commitments was to have dinner as a family. And I couldn't do that by myself, running a company and being a big mortgage originator. So I hired help to allow me to have uninterrupted family dinners with my kids. And I'm super grateful, you
I
know?
love I love that. Well, I think it takes a lot of confidence to ask for help. Because, like as you pointed out, I think as women, we don't necessarily want to say that we need help because it feels vulnerable. And we are strong, powerful people, but at the end of the day, when you're juggling a career and a mom and a household and everything and friends and everything else in the world that there is, I mean, you need some help. And it sounds like you really figured out a way to do that. Was there a system that that you did that allowed you to kind of realize what areas you needed help in or didn't, as far as like, did you ever track your day or do anything like that?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because one of the things that, and I really want people listening to really think about doing this for themselves. So I decided, I thought I needed a second LOA because I had built my business to where I just felt like we were busting at the seams at work and I couldn't hold it all together and things were starting to fall through the cracks. And um, so I really believed that I needed a second LOA, but I wasn't exactly sure. So I started tracking my time, and I teach this now. I have a tracker, and if anyone wants it, they can email me at info@cindiertman.com and I'll be happy to send it to them. But it's just a productivity tracker and it's very simple. But just to track your time over 2 business days. And I mean, no one's going to see it but you, right? So from the time you wake up in the morning, if you're on social media, if you're taking out the trash, if you're walking your dog, like to really look at how you're spending your time, because how many hours can go by on a social media, deep dive, right? So really tracking your time, and then throughout the day, and then after 2 days, and I tracked it in 15-minute increments. You can just write it on a notepad. It's very simple. But then you go back and you put a plus or a minus next to every single thing you did. Is that a good use of your time? Does it fuel you, or does it deplete you? And it's not something you want to be doing. Maybe you're calculating income in your file. Maybe you're collecting conditions, whatever it might be. But I'll give you an example of something that happened for me when I did that exercise. I walked my dog every morning. Now, y'all, I love my dog. It's not that, right? But he was a pain to walk and he was slow. And I always felt like I was behind. And so I just thought, I don't want to walk my dog anymore. So then I talked to my nanny and I just said, Sarah, I need your help. I'm going to have you start walking Sam. And so for the next, by the way, my nanny is now my housekeeper and she's been working for me for 32 years. And
That's incredible.
it's pretty cool. And she works for another family. She just takes care of me one day a week. But the reality is, it is a really special thing to realize, like, what do you really want to be spending your time doing? So I went through my day and put pluses and minuses, and then I put all the minuses on a separate sheet. And what I realized is that what I needed was a executive/personal assistant, not a loan officer assistant. They weren't loan things. I needed someone to help me with my house. I needed like I needed a handyman. I needed things painted. I needed help with my lunch and learns. I needed help with, there were so many things I needed help with that were not loan file related.
Yeah.
And I couldn't afford a full-time assistant at that point. So a friend of mine suggested, she says, well, why don't you just hire someone for a few hours a week? And I don't know why I hadn't thought of that. And I went out to a group of, I ran a network group here in my local community. And I asked them, I said, I'm looking for somebody 15 hours a week. My first executive assistance, it was executive / personal. And I still do it the same way today, only now it's been full-time for many years. And I wanted 80% work on my business, 20% committed to my personal life, anything and everything, dry cleaning, car wash, fill with gas, run to the grocery store. And at that time I was doing a lot of travel, researching travel and flights and scheduling my itineraries, but it changed my life. And I hired someone for 15 hours a week for $15 an hour. And it was life-changing. And it was the single best hire I ever made to
I
help me
love that.
my life and my business. And I highly recommend it.
Yeah, I mean, that's brilliant. I mean, it sounds like you, by tracking your day, you were able to eliminate your sort of energy drainers for you personally, and then find somebody to come in and, fill that gap for you, which is amazing. So, is there anything else, like, as your career grew, that, and your responsibilities grew as a leader, that you did outside of that, or is that pretty much wrapped up everything you needed?
Well, I do think that we all need to be very conscious of the things that drain our energy. Because when you get intentional about how you're spending your day and how you're spending, really, and for me, it's not just about time management. We always talk about time management, and we do a lot of coaching around time management, but really it's energy management if we break it down. And so I think it's terribly important to look at what really drains our energy, because it's that white noise that we carry around, right? And so that's another, I think, really important exercise to look at in your own life, in your own business. And there's kind of 4 different categories that I look at. And I do this exercise periodically myself, but I think it's terribly important to look at, like, number 1 is mindset. And we talked about that at the WMN retreat. It's like, what stories are we telling ourselves that just aren't true? What are the negative thoughts that we're carrying around? How are we beating ourselves up? Are we feeling like we're an imposter syndrome, or are we comparing ourselves to other people, which we all do? Like, it's a human condition, right? So getting really clear on what do we need to shift in terms of our own mindset, and getting very conscious about what are we actually thinking about. One of my coaches last year said to me, he said, when you go on your walk, because I walk 3 times a week, he said, I want you to notice what you're noticing. And I was like, seems so strange. Notice what I'm noticing. But it's like I started paying attention, meaning, what are you thinking about? Are you thinking good, positive thoughts about where your career is going and what you're doing? Are you beating yourself up, putting guilt on yourself, not feeling enough, not doing enough at home, not doing enough at work? And so one is really working on, and I do morning practices to really keep my mindset strong, because I believe in it with everything I've got, because we all carry around negative thoughts at different times. So for me, my day starts with reading a devotional. I go into my gratitude journal, and I do gratitude every single morning, because I have so many things in my life, we all do, to be grateful for. And then I do 10 to 15 minutes of meditation. I use Insight Timer app, but I am religious about these practices. And if I get overly stressed or things start to become problematic, I'll double down on those practices. I'll do them twice a day. And exercise to me is big. I hate exercise, so I make myself do it because it's good for my mindset. But I have practices on pretty much everything. I'm a big systems person because it makes our life so much easier. So mindset is, first of all, number 1. How do we clear our mindset and get us in a better place to eliminate that as an energy drainer? One of the biggest things around mindset is financial challenges, beating yourself up on how you're handling finances. Maybe it's lack of income or lack of savings, so we have to really work on mindset first. Next is an energy drainer, is the situations we're in. Maybe you're in an environment that's not a healthy environment. One of my clients right now lives in a very noisy neighborhood, and she wants to move because she works from home. And it's not a settling place for her to be. Looking at our homes, it's so great to go through every room of your house. And I call it the what bugs you list. Go into every room and do a separate sheet and write down every single thing that bugs you. Are there clothes? Are there closets that need to be cleaned out? Does your desk a mess and you got papers all over? Like, I can't live in that circumstance. So when I did that exercise, I ended up hiring a organization company to help me clean out my garage. And I decided to completely redo my backyard because those were my two areas that I didn't like the energy they were putting off. So cleaning up our situations and making sure we're in a good, healthy, clean environment, it keeps a clean brain. And then technology, let's face it, social media, phones, emails, I get so much coming at us, and creating practices around how much time I spend 15 minutes a day on social media. I'm very intentional about it. I don't want to go down the social media rabbit hole. It's not healthy for me. I think it's not healthy for a lot of people. So
Yeah.
you can be cautious as to who you're friends with on social. I protect that avidly. Like, I want to be around people that are uplifting and care about other people, and I don't want to follow drama. So I disconnect from anybody negative in social media gets deleted and blocked. I
Yeah.
don't really care who you are. It's like I really protect my own energy. And then and our surroundings are terribly important, but I want you to also think about, are you around any negative people? Because to me, that can be one of the biggest energy drainers. And it could be family members. It could be people in your office environment. Maybe I had a really negative processor for many years, but she was the best processor I'd ever had. And it's so hard, but I eventually fired her. And it was devastating on many levels, but she'd become a cancer to our office. And she was disrupting the energy. And it was the best thing I ever did. So I also love making a list. It's a great practice and an exercise. Just try this. Make a list of the 20 closest people in your life, your kids, your family, your spouse, your business associates. And this was a very fruitful exercise. I made a list of the 20 people that were closest in my life. And then you put a plus or a minus. Do they fuel you and uplift you, or are they energy drainers? And of the top 20 for me, 3 of them were energy drainers. And, one of them was my production partner at the time, many years ago. But she was a good friend and she was a great person, but she had a really high D personality and she was a lot sometimes. So I just made a conscious choice to spend less physical time in her space, not to disconnect from her. She was a really great person, a great partner, but getting intentional about the people that we have. And my processor was one of the people on the list, and I decided it was time to let her go. So
Yeah. It's a hard choice. I know, like, for Tom as well, like, culture in our company is incredibly important. And there have been choices where, to bring somebody on that was extremely high producing, that the choice was made not to bring them on because even in the initial conversations the onboarding, he could tell that, the attitude of, helping other people or being a team player wasn't there, and it was more like a me thing, and that is not the culture we have, because you would be surprised how quick one person or one attitude can completely, like, spoil it for an entire group of people, and change and shift the culture. It's incredible having, when you let a negative energy around you, how that the ripple effect of that is just incredible, and it's not worth it. It's
no.
just
And it's so true, and it's so smart, on your guys' behalf, because we did it. Like, I had a business partner, and we're still dear friends to this day. We were partners for over 20 years, and we ran the business together. And he wanted to hire everybody because he loved everybody, but they weren't always a cultural fit. And then I managed them, so then I'd be like, why did you hire this person? So then we started establishing practices of we both had to agree to hire individuals, and I started really defining our hiring practices. So I'm passionate about helping people today with hiring the right people the first time. So I have very detailed hiring practices that keep us from making poor hires, because like to your point, Nicole, it can disrupt everybody if they're the wrong fit. And being around the right people, even our friends. I will not do drama. I'll help my friends through anything, like for a long time, as long as you need. But I protect my energy. I want to be with the right people. And so I have amazing, I got my fistful of like amazing, incredible friends and we're just there. We can share our wins, and we can feel safe, and we can tell each other our deepest, darkest secrets. And I think there's also something about, who's in your tribe, and having the right people that you can really trust. And I think the more you go up the ladder as we start to grow, and I'm sure many people listening to this will be able to relate to this, not everybody wants us to grow. Some leaders above us don't want us to grow, and they try to keep us small, and they push us back in our box, and they don't want us to expand. And I do a lot of coaching, particularly for female leaders that are trying to have a seat at the table and a bigger voice, and they get swatched down by some of their leadership, and how to get heard in a noisy market, without beating our way to the top, because it can be difficult when you're strong and you're starting to be successful. And even some of our friends don't really want us to be that successful. So I think it's important to find tribes of people. And I think that's even where coaching can come in and be really supportive, is to give you that layer of support, because the higher you go into any business and the more successful you become, the more lonely it is at the top, you know?
Yeah. I think that's a very true statement. And just having the boundaries around knowing that. And like you said, having a coach to help you identify, does this person genuinely support your growth or not really? And I think even sometimes people subconsciously don't realize that, they're not, supporting somebody's growth, or they're inhibiting it. And it's important, if you're not a person that can really see that yourself, to have somebody secondhand say, maybe you want to take a look at this one here, because I think that you could do this and you would be fabulous, and keep going. So that's amazing. So sounds like you have incredible boundaries, which I think are really important in life. And many women feel guilty from working and at home. Like, what boundaries did you set that you put in place that you still didn't feel like you were letting people down, but you were still protecting your own peace?
Well, and I think it's terribly important. And I think people need to, look, we know that being a mortgage originator, we've got to be somewhat accessible, right? But that doesn't mean that we can't have some boundaries that protect, our family, and being a mom, and being a spouse or a partner and all that. But some of two things that I did early on, because I was raised in a very traditional family where we had dinner as a family. Now, that's not such a common tradition anymore, but that was one I wanted to carry forth. So I did make a commitment that I was going to have family dinner without phones at the table. And even to this day, my grown children, they're not allowed to have phones at my dinner table, because that was just something we established early on. Because it's like we work so much, and we're connected to that device so much. So that became a non-negotiable. And people are so afraid of missing a call for a new transaction, and I get it. But the reality is, my voicemail said, if you're reaching this between 6:30 and 8 in the evening, I'm having dinner with my children, and I'll call you back after 8 o'clock. So they knew it was right there on my voicemail for all to hear. And my realtors all knew it. Like, I trained them. They weren't at all concerned that they weren't reaching me, because they knew 100% I was going to call them back. But it gave me an hour and a half to come home and have dinner with my kids, get them started on homework, or get baths done or whatever. And then I could go back and focus on people that I needed to follow up with. But that helped me. And I didn't feel guilty about that. I feel that I chose to be a mom, and I had 3 kids, and they deserved a little uninterrupted time, because look, I'm just as guilty. I found myself at times like on the phone, and I remember this, and I trained myself out of this. I remember my daughter walking into the bedroom, and I'd be like this at night, and I'd be like, 1 minute. How many times? Like 1 minute, 1 minute, 1 minute. And then one day I'm like, no, one more minute. I'm going to not be on my phone for an hour and a half, and the world's not going to come to an end. And, I became one of the top producers in the nation, so it didn't hurt my business. And another thing I did, and people don't feel they can do it, and I get it, it's so hard. But my other non-negotiable was 2 weeks vacation every summer. And I took 2 consecutive weeks, my whole mortgage career. And in the beginning, I didn't have partners or production partners, and I would get another loan officer. And sometimes I would get 2, one for each week. And I would ask them to cover, and then I would offer to cover them when they went on vacation. It wasn't perfect. I lost some business, but I would tell you today, I wouldn't trade. And I would be tired. Like, I worked hard. And so we went to islands all over the world. I wanted to go plop on a beach and play in the water with my kids. We weren't doing like European sightseeing trips, but I lost some business. I did, but I don't regret one of those vacations. And it brought us back together as a family. We didn't even travel with another family. We wanted it to be just us. And Nicole, I know this is highly unpopular and my kids wanted to kill me, but I remember when we went to Fiji and my son walked into the hotel room, there's no television and there was no internet, and he thought he was going to die. Like, he wanted to kill me. But guess what happens after 48 hours with no TV and connectivity is everybody's together. Yep. And they're doing, hermit crab races and things that were just, and I really believe that the reason we have such a great family with grown adult children is because we did have some non-negotiables to focus on family first.
Yeah, the intentionality of time spent together is really important, and especially in those foundational years with the kids. We have a 16-year-old daughter, and she travels with us all the time, and we make time to play board games at night. And we just were on a ski trip, and we were all together all day skiing, and those things build those relationships. So when they become adults, they want to hang out with the family and they're comfortable with that. And so that's really incredible that you were able to maintain all of those things that you wanted as a mother and as a family, but still have this tremendous career. I really applaud you for that and for sharing how you did that, because I think that there is definitely, some learning curves in being a businesswoman and, running your household and your family at the same time. So any tips, I think I'll take them myself too,
Well, that's what I said. I think I would think about a problem, like when I hired the personal assistant, and I was like, there's got to be a creative solution to this. And when I really, that's why I said, when I hired the 15-hour a week personal / executive assistant and admin assistant, I gave myself permission to not have to do everything myself. And the reality is, this is another thing. I had a client a couple of years ago. She was in Arizona and they were having financial issues. They had a lot of debt that had been racked up. And we were on our coaching session one day, and she said that they decided to fire their housekeeper because they just couldn't afford it anymore. And she had 3 kids, young kids. And when she told me that, I was just like, you did what? And she goes, no, we, in the essence, to save money, we decided to let her go. And I said, so what did you do last Saturday? She goes, I cleaned for 8 hours and doing laundry and beds. And I'm listening to her. And I said, listen, I want you to go pull, she was W-2'd. I said, I want you to go pull your W-2 from last year and let's divide it by your hours and let's look at your hourly rate. And I said, what were you paying your housekeeper? And she said, $20 an hour. And I said, and look at your hourly rate and times 8 hours of you cleaning your own house. And you were paying her, and so let's just do the math. I go, do you think if you took 4 of those hours and I gave you a very specific exercise to build your referral partners to earn you more money to pay for that housekeeper, do you think that would be a better use of your time? And she kind of got quiet, but it was seeing the math in real time for what the hourly rate and the hourly rate. And I was super proud of her because not only did she go back and rehire the housekeeper that was only coming once every 2 weeks, but she hired her to come every week. And then I said, let's focus on income and relational activities. And within 60 days, we got her income up and it was a moot point. So sometimes we're not thinking correctly, right? We shouldn't be the one letting go of the housekeeper. We should be taking that time that we're saving and putting it into intentional activities that are going to move the needle on your life and your business.
I love that. That's so perfect. That's so smart. So, what lessons from motherhood and from, your family life made you a better leader?
Well, oh, there's so many things, right? Because they're so related on so many levels. One thing that I just want to share because it was so powerful to me. And when my oldest son, I live in Manhattan Beach, California, our family does, and he was being recruited to play football by the Ivy League. So he was a smart kid, great at football, and he had selected University of Pennsylvania. And I had taken him back there several times. But anyway, it was his first time leaving to go to college, and my husband was driving him to the airport. I was saying my goodbyes, and I remember walking upstairs to his bedroom, and I just sat on his bed. I get emotional just thinking about it because I sat on his bed and I just started bawling because I realized there's no do-overs. We can't get our time back with our kids. Like, we got one shot. And it's not that they don't stay in our lives. I'm really close to all three of my kids, but it's different. It's never the same after they leave the nest. And I had done a pretty good job as a mom. But I still had two kids at home, and I made some shifts right then and there to spend more time with them, because you realize how fast it goes when all of a sudden they're off to college. And I called some of my really good female mortgage leader friends that had kids that were still like 8, 9, and 10. And I just said, you guys, like, and I knew how hard they worked and how much they traveled and all the stuff. And I said, there's no do-overs, and we've got one shot to do this right. And we've got to make better choices. And I had done a lot of things right, but I'd done several things wrong. And so I really got super more intentional for my two kids that were still at home to go, we always put it off, right? Like, we'll go on vacation next year. I'm too busy this year, or hey, I don't have as much money this year because the market's down. There's never a good time. But I just say that's why I had a system around it. I committed to 2 weeks vacation with my kids every single year. That was non-negotiable. And that didn't mean we stayed at the Four Seasons. If we didn't have money, we'd stay in a tent. You can do a lot of things inexpensively, right? But the reality is you've got to have non-negotiables around what you're willing to accept. So just realizing that there's no do-overs, whether you're a mom or a dad, or, we got one shot at this thing called parenthood. And I wanted to make that count. And I think the other thing is, focusing on, it's so easy to beat ourselves up. So I really started to be intentional on focusing on progress and not perfection, because I'm a recovering perfectionist. And I want everything done now, and I get big ideas but I'm also an implementer. But just realizing that it's like taking the next step. It doesn't have to be done always in the day. It can be done tomorrow. Not everything is this sense of urgency, and not everything has to be done right now. And it doesn't have to be done perfectly. So I really trained myself, like in my life and my business, to execute imperfectly. I don't care if it's doing a video for social media. Right before this call with you, I filmed videos, and trust me, they were anything but perfect, but they were messages that I thought were important to share. So I think that, and then also really learning that failure in any part of our life is just information. Whether we feel like we've let down a family member, or whether we've, failed at work, we lost the client, or whatever it may be, like, instead of beating ourselves up for we did something wrong, and, but like, okay, it's information. What did I learn from the experience? And and look, you're in this business long enough. There's a lot of stuff that happens, in life and in business. And so I really learned to focus both in family and in business, like focus on what I can control and what I can influence. And every time life throws me a curveball, I go back to that. Okay, it feels horrible that happened. And I like having a key employee walk out or leave or quit, and you feel like devastated because your LOA just walked out after 10 years, or the director of my company quit last year. It was like devastating to me because she ran my whole company. But I go, okay, that's horrible. And you can wallow in that. That doesn't that doesn't help us. But I've trained myself, and this is hard because it takes this to do it. You have to will yourself into focusing on what you can control and influence. Like I remember when my director left last year, it was a Sunday when she called me. And I'm going to be completely transparent. I wanted to go open a bottle of wine, drink the whole thing, and go cover my head with covers, because I didn't want to have to deal with it. But that was not a good choice. So I chose against that. And I went, all right, first I need to get an ad ready because I got to have an ad ready. She gave me 2 weeks notice. She did a lot for my company. I couldn't have it at risk. I went and I put together a job description. And by the next day, I had a list of 5 things that had to get done by Monday. And that's what I spent the next 4 hours doing on a Sunday afternoon, is writing out all the responsibilities that I knew she did. And then I had her do her list of everything she did. I put together a job responsibility and an ad that I got onto Indeed and LinkedIn within 24 hours. I had this whole list of things that I needed to get accomplished within 24 hours. And I focused, and my goal was to have a replacement hired within 7 business days. I accomplished my goal. And then I had 7 days for Dana to train her. And she built out all of her standard operating procedures for me before she left. So she left my company better than she went in. But focusing on what you can control and influence and making yourself just let go of the rest will help you move the needle through any kind of life's trauma, business or personal.
Yeah, I feel that. It's hard to stay focused, especially when something like that happens that feels so devastating in the moment to just, but I love your story about, you instead of curling up under the covers, you took the actions to, okay, how are we going to fix this? We're going to do this in 7 days, and then I'm going to train her, and things, and life goes on, because that's part of life. Life throws you curveballs left and right. I mean, and for me, I related to what you were saying, because some of my biggest successes are on the heels of my biggest failures. And I've learned from that. And then I'm like, okay, this is how I'm going to do this differently going forward. And that's just been an incredible thing. So
It is
I,
so true. And sometimes and like we're all guilty of this. We can stop so short of that next big win because we just give up. Right. I mean, I always think back to, I won one of my number one referral partners. He was the number one realtor in Manhattan Beach, but he kind of came out of nowhere. He wasn't somebody that, like, he just sort of rose up out of nowhere. I'm like, where did this guy come from? And so my partner and I tried to win his business. So we started calling him and emailing him and texting him. And I mean, we made a joke out of it because his name was Sean. And every week on Monday, we would text him. Then the next week we'd call him, and then we'd email him, and then we'd do it all over again, and just short little messages. And we never heard back from him ever for 2 years, ever, like no response. Now I think about it now with people that I coach, like how many loan officers would keep hounding somebody. Most would do it 3 times and give up. Some would only do it once and give up, right? But we just didn't make it so serious. And then one day, 2 years in, we got a text message back from Sean. He said, I'll give you 15 minutes. And we screamed. We're like, oh my God. And he came to our office and he was there for 2 hours. And I said, Sean, why now? Like, you've never even responded. He said, well, you've always been my second choice lender. You just didn't need it because I was dialed in with my first choice. And then he started faltering, and he brought in a partner, and their systems broke down, and he switched companies. And he said, he goes, I'm so busy, Cindy. He goes, but no one has ever pursued me like you guys did. So I knew you would be that strong in taking care of my buyers. And he gave us a $1.4 million loan before he walked out of the office that day. And we worked together, from that moment on. And it's like, it was so empowering for me to know that we made this kind of lighthearted thing every week. Oh, okay, it's gonna reach out to Sean again today, like not so serious, not tied to the outcome. And then eventually we got the outcome that we really had hoped for. And so I just think someone asked me this week on a call, one of my top clients, he said, what do you attribute all of your success to? I said 2 things. Persistence and never giving up. If it doesn't work, I just try it a different way. If someone tells me no, I either ask the wrong person or I ask the wrong question. No just means not yet. I don't take it as no. So one is persistence and two, consistency. Do the thing. My database consistent twice a month for 30 years. First and the 15th, Cindy Ertman wrote an email to my whole past client database and to 100 realtors twice a month for 30 years. Hard mail postcards. I know old school, it still works. Once a quarter. Lunch and learns once a quarter. Like I had systems around everything and they were non-negotiables. And I had consistency in my career for 30 years. And it's what I really believe created my success was persistence and consistency.
Yeah. I mean, when I go to these events, the people that are top producing, I would say the number one thing that I hear from them is consistency and also the persistence. Like you can't give up. Julie and I laugh when we were putting together this last event for the Women's Mortgage Network afternoon. I was adamant about that we have like a snack or a meal or something. And it just, we were wasn't in the budget with trying to get our speakers and everything else that we needed. But I did not stop pushing for it. Even went as far as to, okay, if we go to the because we couldn't bring snacks, any outside snacks in or outside food, everything had to be from the hotel. So I said, well, what if we go to the gift shop and we just buy everyone a granola bar from the gift shop that's technically from the hotel? We can bring it in, and just trying to come up with every way imaginable. The final answer was no. However, because of that, at the next event, we will be having meals and snacks. And it's kind of this running joke that, because I wouldn't give up on it. Because to me, it was important. If you're going to be sitting there that long, you want a snack, you want something to eat. And so I love how you talk about how you've implemented that into your whole career and where it's gotten you and the outcome you've gotten from that. And I just think it's so important that you touched on that. So before we wrap up, if you could leave women in the mortgage industry with one empowering truth about success, family, fulfillment, what would that be?
A couple of things, but I think one of the most important lessons I learned, and this was a big leadership lesson for me. And it was when we had plugged into this mortgage bank and, they were in a different part of the country than we were. And it was a rough couple of years when we plugged into this new entity. And what I realized is that it's really easy in our business, and it's easy in marriages and relationship too, to focus on what's broken. And it's so easy to focus on what's missing, what's not right, and in business and in life. And what I really started to realize was that what I needed to focus on, particularly in business, is what do I need to be successful? Instead of emailing like our CEO, the 10 things that were broken. And look, I did that for many years and what I realized is I was basically telling the owner of my company that his baby was ugly. That's what I was telling him. And he didn't take it so well. And so I got slapped up the side of the head a lot because I'm a strong female. But what I realized over time was instead of framing it about what's broken, no one takes that well, right? And so I started reframing what I needed to be successful, which is just another way of reframing what's broken, but in a much more positive light. So saying, one of the things that would help us be much more successful in our branch is this, and this. And by the way, my suggestion for how we fix this problem. So to say, this is what we need to be successful. And here's my suggestion for how we can fix it. Because when we just tell somebody something's broken, but we're not giving them any suggestions as for how we can fix the problem, nothing actually changes. And I think it's very similar, even in marriage and relationships, because it's so easy to just blame a partner for something that's broken or be unhappy about something that somebody does, but what about all the good things, and sometimes it's so easy to go down that rabbit hole, or people complaining about their company, right? and coaching. I hear this all the time, and they're going on and on and on about their company. And I can start to pick up on idiosyncrasies on, they said this about their last company too. We have one common thread here, and it's you. So let's reframe how you're looking at your company, and let's look at how we can create positive change in a way that's not just going to be for you, but that's good for your company. And so helping, loan originators and leaders reframe their messaging and ask for things in a way that get the results that they're looking for. Because one of my greatest lessons, I talked about it at WMN, was when I was training for a year with Jack Canfield. It was personal development training, not mortgage training. And it changed my life. And he's another reason I ended up launching a coaching and training company, because through that experience of working with Jack Canfield, who wrote all the Chicken Soup for the Soul books, is I started to believe I was capable of launching a successful mortgage coaching and training company. I believed I could actually do it. And that's what we try to do in coaching, is to empower people to see their generous gifts and how can we shine a brighter light and move the needle forward. But one of Jack's biggest lessons was his E plus R equals O. Events plus response equals outcome. And we can't always control the events of our life. We can't control the financial markets. We couldn't control COVID. We can't control sometimes health events. But we can control how we respond to those events to create the outcome that we want in our life. So I approach all my challenges with, what outcome do I want from this experience? And how am I going to get there? How am I going to respond to that challenge? And I think even in my business partnership with my, business partner for 20 plus years, we got into a habit of looking at life that way. Okay, we have a shared vision for the outcome. We might have different ideas as how we're going to get there. Now, how do we bridge that gap? So it's taking that pause to respond to something thoughtfully for the outcome you want to create. Maybe your loan gets declined by an underwriter and you're livid and you're angry, and you're, instead of screaming at the underwriter, it's like, work towards shared solution. Look, we both want to get this loan approved. Let's find another way to make this work, and work in collaboration to create the outcome we want to achieve. But that intentional practice for me has really changed my life and my business. And I think I'd really encourage other people to focus on the outcome. You want to become a female leader in this business? Let's talk about how we're going to get you there. Let's talk about who you need to become in order to make that happen. And that's just a super fun thing to be part of, to help people rise to their full capacity in a very, very special and, fulfilling career.
I love that. Well, this has been such a pleasure. When I was told that I got to interview you, I was like jumping for joy, because you are so wise and you have great systems and you're consistent and very organized. And for me personally, the reminders and the stories that you've shared are incredible, like, pieces that I'm going to take away and implement into my life. And so even just spending this 50 minutes with you, I've learned so much. I can't imagine how much I would learn if I was, training under you and got your undivided with my personal things. So,
Thank you, Nicole, so much. It's been an honor to be with you. And I'm excited because I've been wanting to get to know you a little bit better after WMN. So it's so fun. And, the last thing is just, I don't do any of this alone, right? I have a great team. I had a great team in mortgage. It's a team sport. And so, I give my team a lot of credit for my success as an originator and as a leader, and certainly as a coach. And we know we're better together, right?
Yes, for sure. Yes, I love that. And I love that women are coming together really to lift each other up and encourage each other and share our secrets with each other and our successes and our failures. And that's just so important for us to share with each other to grow and be the best versions of ourselves. So thank you so much for your time today.
Welcome. And Nicole, if anybody's interested in learning more, they can go to my website. It's the definingdifference.com or cindyrtman.com. They go to the same place. And we have a schedule an appointment. There's no obligation, but we love to just dive in to talk through what your biggest challenges are and see if there's anything that we offer that would be a fit for you. So if anyone wants to just get a free coaching session and get some information about what might help you take the next steps to your next level of success, we would love to have a conversation with you.
Thank you so much. And ladies, take advantage of that. I know that I have learned a lot from Cindy, and even meeting her at our event. She always has a lot of wisdom for all of us. So if you've made it this far on the Women's Mortgage Network podcast, thank you so much for joining us. You can find us on Facebook on the Women's Mortgage Network. We'd love for you to join if you are in the industry. Please join us. Also, if you are not a member of AIM, that is where all of this action happens. We have our events multiple times a year. We have incredible people, speakers like Cindy, who join us and help educate us and lift us in our business. So thank you so much for your participation, and we hope to see you soon.
Thanks, Nicole.
Bye.